Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Adventures of a Real Estate Investor. I'm Susie.
And I'm Michael, and we're excited you joined us for this adventure.
So today's guest is David Pere. David, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, I'm really excited that you're here. So just a little bit of background, like how we met David. It was through his platform from Military Millionaire. So if anybody is not out there aware of this platform yet, it's a really awesome platform. You should definitely check it out. We'll get to, Dave will probably at the end describe how to get there, but we'll get to that in a second. Anyways, my first platform when we first started getting into real estate that I came across was Dave's platform, and it was actually the first platform that I posted on about real estate, and I just like put myself out there, and I was like super scared, like I don't know anything about real estate investing, but I was like, hey, I'm interested in like real estate investing. I'm in the UK. I'm looking at doing some long distance stuff. And then that's it. I left it at that. I think it was pretty simple. And then, everybody is like commenting. All these people are living over in the UK. And then it's how we met Marcus Long, who was also a guest on the show. And yeah, then everything kind of, I guess snowballed from there. And so Dave, thank you so much for building that platform. It's made an impact on a lot of people's lives, and really appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that it didn't disappoint too much. That would have been still fairly new in the platform. It's grown a lot since then. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So David, would you please share with our listeners your background and why you started investing in real estate?
Yeah, I mean, so my background, Marine Corps for the last 12 and a half years, logistics guy from the Midwest who just wanted to get out of the Midwest and didn't know what he wanted to study for school. So why not join the military? And kind of traveled around a little bit. And by 2014, 2015, I had accumulated probably a zero, if not negative net worth, and done everything wrong that you can think of in the military, from tattoos to buying a new Harley from deployment, old trucks and guns and, chasing tail and drinking and whatever, like nothing to show for anything I'd done in the military financially, except for maybe a little bit in the TSP, but that was just kind of luck of the draw. And I left it in the wrong fund and didn't accrue any interest on it. So basically every mistake you can make as a service member, except for buying a brand new car, I bought a Harley instead. And in mid 2015, someone handed me the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I was like, I don't want to read. Like, I'm not much of a reader. And he called my bluff, handed me a CD and was like, well, you're a recruiter. You drive around a lot. Like, just put this in and listen to it while you drive. And I was like, okay, fine. So I listened to it kind of just to, spite him, fine. You got me. I'll listen to it. And then within 6 months of that, I'd read a whole bunch of other books and bought a duplex. So it was like kind of like the timing all came together where my Harley got totaled at the same time as my lease was ending. And so I was like, well, man, I need to find another place to live. And let me just look around for some duplexes. This sounds cool. And I found one that worked. I had the down payment because my lender talked me out of using the VA loan. So I used an FHA loan. So I had the down payment from the insurance on the Harley. And that was my first foray into real estate. And then about 6 months later, I got orders and I got stationed in Hawaii. And all of a sudden that property was paying me every month to own it. And I was like, wow, there's something to this. This is pretty cool. And it just kind of grew from there. It was never, I don't know that I ever had like a reason for investing in real estate other than that I knew once I got out of the military, I didn't want to have to, go get another job or government contract or whatever. I wanted to be able to actually retire. And then it just kind of grew very quickly to a point where it was like, oh, like this has already replaced my income. And now I can, make choices based on what I want to do and what will make me happy and fulfilling, as opposed to what I feel like I have to do for security. So it's been pretty cool.
So I do have a question about something that you said, like you wanted to make sure that you didn't have to go into like another job once you retired. So initially, was your plan to stay in the military the full 20 years?
Well, when I first joined, my plan was to do 4 years and figure out what I wanted to do for school and then go to college. And then I realized I still didn't have any desire to go to college. And I had a whole lot of fun that first 4 years doing deployments and other cool kid stuff. It was like everything you could ever want as far as a young adventurer. So I stuck around, and then I actually tried out for special forces, blew out my knee, ended up on recruiting duty, which is about the next best thing. So I've always been more of the like exciting side of the military, like, you know, drop me off in the middle of nowhere and call it a day. Like that's the kind of stuff that I enjoy, as miserable as it is. Unfortunately, that's not really happening as much as it used to, if at all anymore. And so now I've kind of got to this point where I'm at like 12 and a half years. I'm really like, well, I'm making more money through real estate than I am in the military, but I'm also not being fulfilled as much in the Marine Corps as I once was. The adventure side isn't there. I'm kind of a desk jockey now. So I'm like, okay, well, which one of these can allow me to pursue what makes me happy in life? And which one of these will I be able to help more people with? Well, taking this full time. So that's why I'm doing for those, I mean, sure, most people who know me probably know this by now, but I'm transferring into the reserves this year. So at 13 years, I'll be in the reserves for the last 7 of my tour. So the plan was never to do 20, but by the time I got into real estate, I was kind of thinking I was going to do 20. Because then I was at 8 years and didn't really have any other plans. And then it just kind of morphed over time into, well, hey, this is actually going to allow me the opportunity to, and a couple conversations with guys like Doug Nordman talking about different options and realizing the reserves would give me most of what I wanted out of the military, but still allow me the opportunity to take things full time on my stuff. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. And then so once you figured out the power of real estate, like you mentioned, you moved to Hawaii, this duplex is paying you to own it. You realize like, holy crap, this is awesome. At what point, you know, were you like, oh, I need to get this out to more military members? And when did you launch like the platform and everything like that?
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting start to that. I should have grabbed it over there. I have a journal from my deployment. I don't know why I was smart enough to do this. I guess luck. Someone probably told me to do it, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll try it." But I kept a journal and a mission log all the way through my deployment, and I can literally like sync them up and go, "Hey, this is the day I drove over an IED, and this is how I was feeling on that day." And so I was thinking about writing a book about like what normal people went through in Afghanistan, because all the books out there are all like special forces and, you know, I killed Osama bin Laden and whatever. No books about like the normal guy just doing normal things. And then I realized nobody was going to read it because nobody knows who I am. And it's not like a catchy, you know, book title from a big, super successful, like world, you know, Medal of Honor recipient or whatever. So I was talking to a friend and he was over for dinner and he was like, why don't you just start a blog? You know, and I was like, okay, cool. Well, what do I don't know anything about that. And he gave me some pointers, and then we were talking about what I should write about. He's like, just talk about like what you're doing in real estate. That's something to, you know, like it's something as you learn, you can, it really never, there was no vision for it. It was just kind of a spur of the moment. Oh, okay, this will help me get better at writing. And maybe some people will know who I am if I ever decide to write a book, which ironically I have now, but it's not that book. So maybe that book will still come someday. I still have the journal sitting over there staring at me whenever I tell this story. But yeah, it wasn't even like I can't take credit for the idea. I can't take credit for the name because all the names I came up with were garbage. And one of my friends came up with the From Military to Millionaire. I can't take credit for most of the stuff for starting it. And then it was just kind of a fun way for me to just kind of write articles about what I was doing and just kind of share online, like, hey, this is what I'm doing here. This is what I'm doing there. And then I don't know if it was the name that was catchy or the fact that we don't try to peddle a whole bunch of expensive crap on people. And we just try to like answer questions and provide like videos and blogs. But it's kind of exploded over the last year, which is pretty crazy to see, considering that, yeah, people ask me like, what's your 4 or 5 year vision with it? Like, I have no idea. I didn't even have a vision for it when I started. It just kind of morphed into this thing. So
wow. How many users do you have or followers or whatever it's called on your link or your Facebook page?
Facebook is just shy of 15,000 right now.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. Well, that's really incredible because 40% of that's over the last 28 days. I don't know what happened. It went from like all of a sudden it went like this. And
you're hitting that hockey stick growth. Yeah.
It spiked. It went from like maybe 100 people a week to like 200 a day joining in very, very, very short time frame. I don't know. Yeah, that's probably the most impactful channel. The Instagram's a little bit bigger, but you can't be nearly as communicative on that as you can in the Facebook group.
Yeah.
Now, you know what's awesome? Like somebody told you to write a blog post and you started to, you know, like that's a huge even stopping point for a lot of people, right? They're like, I don't know how to write. Nobody's going to listen to what I have to say. So like, how did you get past that? Because I mean, even when you said Like none of this was my idea. Technically, real estate was like, I mean, what, there's like 4 or 5 people at the very beginning whose idea it was, and we've all copied it from then. But like, that's like one of the greatest parts is that like, we're all in this together. Like a lot of real estate is like teamwork based, but like we're all writing the same things, but from our own perspective. And so how did you, like I asked, like get past wanting to continue to write those blog posts, not knowing like what would happen with them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I never actually answered the earlier question. I guess January, February of 2018 was when everything started.
Okay.
In fact, I actually shared a video 3 months ago in my Facebook group or on my Facebook, my personal page. And I was like, wow, this aged well. And so it's this video I made, and it was, I can't remember if it was February or March, but it was like a recap. And it was just like a 3-minute video filmed on my computer where it was like, I read The Miracle Morning. I started waking up early. I wrote my first blog post. Did my first video, like, and it was like this, like the very first month of everything. And it was like a 3-minute video of saying like, I guess we'll see what happens. I'm just going to stay consistent and figure it out. And that, like, everything that I talked about in that video, I had stayed consistent with and had exploded. And I was like, oh man, look at that consistency. Like, here it is, less than 3 years ago. I had no idea what I was doing with any of this. So I think that was kind of the answer. I realized like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to write one blog post every Monday or post one blog post every Monday. And it's going to start with one YouTube video that coincides every Monday. And that's really what it was that. And that was just from watching other content people talk about consistency. So I was like, all right, well, I watched a lot of Pat Flynn. I don't know if he runs Simple Passive Income or something like that, but he has a bunch of courses and podcasts and YouTube and courses on podcasting. And so I watched a lot of his content starting off. And then I got in with some other people who do blogging and just kind of asking questions. I just realized like, okay, look, if I just write one blog post every week, do one video every week, and the podcast came around about 9 months later. Then, if I do that, well, hey, we'll see what happens. At least I'll be consistent. Like as long as I don't ever miss. I actually missed my first podcast episode ever, like 2 weeks ago, just from technical difficulties and stuff. And by the time I realized it hadn't posted, I was like, we'll just bump it a week. But until then, I've never missed a blog post on a Monday. I've never missed a YouTube video on a Monday. And now I do like 3 YouTube videos a week, at least, sometimes 4 or 5. I just realized like, it doesn't have to be the highest quality stuff as long as it's consistent and answers questions. And what I started doing as I went along was, as people started paying attention, it was like, okay, well, if people are asking me the same question, then that's a video that needs to be made. So if people ask, like in early 2020, everybody was asking about refinancing their house. So those were questions that was a video that needed to be made. Or now that the VA renovation loan's coming back, there are people starting to ask those questions again. So I'll probably make another video about that. And so I guess it just kind of realized like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to just keep going and see what happens, but I have to just keep going. And it's funny because like, if you talk to podcast data, there's something like 40 or 50 people, or 40 or 50% of people who start podcasts never make it past episode 20. There's some crazy statistic out there. And it's like, if you just keep going, eventually it's going to catch on at some point. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of been my strategy, I guess, is just be, I don't know, I guess stubborn, use the old Marine Corps, like hard head, and just keep going no matter what.
Yeah, I love that. So 2 things I want to kind of hit on with that is just like, number one, what you said, consistency, right? So that's super important. And then the other thing you said was like, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? So a lot of people are wrapped up around perfection. And so we were actually on a call a couple of days ago with Cameron Harold, like Vivid Vision guy and stuff like that. Yep. And so he was talking about, he's like, perfection in business is a B+. He's like, everybody thinks that you have to be perfect to get that A or whatever, like that's what you're taught in school. He's like, but in business, that's a B+. Consistency and momentum is an A, right? And because momentum feeds momentum, right? And then you keep going, like you're saying, being consistent, and then eventually you'll take off. And so that was really powerful for me to hear that, because I am, fortunately, like I'm more of the perfectionist side of things, and I'm really working towards just getting content out there. And if it's a little messed up, that's totally fine, right? So
yeah, and even to add to that, like a limiting factor I had to like get past in the beginning was I had thought like, who's going to actually read this? But the thing is that like, you need those touch points, right? So yes, 50 to 100 people aren't going to read your very first blog post because they don't even know it exists, right? So then you do it again and you do it again and you do it again. And that's really when you get that traction. But it does take like quite a few blog posts or videos to be able to get there. And so that's really what consistency like does as well. Like it gets you that momentum, because if people see it every Monday, if they see it over and over and over, then they'll start looking for it every Monday. But if you post it one Monday and then another random Wednesday and a Friday, that they'll have no reason to like stop, because they're like, well, I don't know if he's even really into this.
You hit on an interesting point there. Alex and I joke about this all the time, because everybody gets that feeling of like the almost perfectionist. They don't want to post their first article because they don't feel like it's good enough, or what if people don't like it or whatever. And Alex always jokes, because he's like, man, was I narcissistic to think anybody was even going to read my first post? Well, that's actually a really good point, because nobody reads my first stuff, right? So I don't think anybody ever did. Maybe a few friends, but whatever, like those aren't the ones that get traction, right? They're later on, when you finally learned how to write and you've got some momentum on your page and Google starts to realize that you're real, and it grows. Yeah. And then the imposter syndrome piece of like, who am I to write this, or who's even going to read this? Oh, that's so real. That does not, that I still struggle with. In fact, it's funny, because you're the war room, right? So I thought about starting a mastermind group for like 6 months. And then one day, and I just kept talking myself out of it, because I was like, no one wants to do this. This is stupid. Oh, this is a dumb idea. Okay. And then one day Stu called me and he's like, hey, I've had this great idea. You want to start a mastermind? And I was like, yes, I do. Been wanting to do this forever. And, and it's turned out great, but I stopped myself from even thinking about that for like 6 months for no reason other than, who am I?
So what made you want to transition, I guess, from military to millionaire, like all those platforms, into a mastermind? Like what happened where you were like, I need to reach people deeper?
Well, I'm a huge fan of mastermind groups. So I've probably in 4 or 5. Well, I've probably been in 5 or 6. 2 of which were like paid, one of them fairly expensive. And I've just always gotten a ton out of them. In fact, I've got a mastermind call with some YouTubers that I do every week here in a half hour. And talk about YouTube and whatnot. And so I guess it was just part of the fact that I selfishly wanted to kind of create a community of people that I would want to hang out with and learn from and talk real estate with. And, unfortunately, the only way to get a serious group of people together is to put a little bit of a premium on it and make it there be a commitment, right? There has to be a little bit of skin in the game. Otherwise you get all the people who show up who aren't worth hanging out with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was kind of part of it, was selfishly just wanting to level up the people that I was hanging out with in the military real estate community. And then also to realize like, well, if you want to actually help people, you got to find a way to set up a group that's more goal oriented and doesn't have flaky people in it, right? So the only way to do that is to make it some like an application process with commitments and times and whatever. And it's been kind of crazy to see what's happened with that group, because people are doing deals together all over the place. And it's been kind of nuts. So I didn't have any idea what to expect when we started it, but it's pretty cool. But I don't know that it was ever a thought to like transition from real estate to that, so much as just, this is a cool opportunity and we should see what happens with it. Real estate's still really my main squeeze. I think, I don't know. There's just something fun about chasing deals.
No,
Yeah.
totally get that. And something that I want to like add is like, for me with masterminds, it's like seeing other people who are like me and look like me and, want to do the same things I do is like a really big motivator, right? Because when we're all doing this like together, it really gives you like different ideas and it makes you come up with creative ways to do things. And so even something like, if you decide you don't want to be in a mastermind, like that's a huge thing with meetups too. Like a lot of people think meetups are scary, but really, like the more often you go to those meetups, like the easier it gets and the more familiar you are with the people in it, right? And that's definitely what a mastermind brings as well, because then you can ask different questions because your self-confidence grows. And so also that ties back to consistency, but I love how like all of that comes together because it definitely helps people grow. And that's the biggest part, right? Because without everybody else's ideas as well, like there is somewhat of stunted growth, right? Like if it's just you doing it on your own, like there's only so much there, right? Like you don't know your blind spots until somebody else tells you. And so just being in that group where everybody can bounce ideas off of each other is awesome.
Well, I might not have pulled the trigger on this hotel if it wasn't for people in the mastermind group. Jake Volan and Jeremy Hands being two of them, that were like, it seemed too good to be true. And I've been, you guys have probably heard my story, but I've been burned on a big deal before. And so it seemed way too good to be true. And I was in my head, like, there's no way this is legit. So I sent the numbers to them and I sent the numbers to a third friend, and like all three of them were like, dude, you better take this thing down. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I had other friends look at it for me. And then, but I wasn't sure if I was going to take that thing down for a little while, because I was like, man, this, like, what am I missing on this? There's got to be something. This seems like this is a big step, and this is, whatever. So yeah, having people that you can bounce those ideas off, I mean, that's a game changer in real estate and in anything you do, for sure, but especially in real estate, right? Where the stakes can be fairly high. If you're, we're talking, we put $300,000 down between the three of us on, what could be an incredible deal. But if it wasn't, like, it's a substantial amount of money for a enlisted Marine to throw down on something and not know if it's going to work. Right. Like, that's, for anyone listening to this, that's like, yeah, that's my salary, and that's 2.5 times my taxable salary. So
Absolutely. Would you say like that project has been your most creative project so far?
I've had some really interesting creative. So for my first probably 3 or 4 years, I didn't put more than 6% down on a property. I did like a 10 unit that was 85% bank financing, 10% seller, and then 5% out of pocket. I had another deal that was a lease option. That's the one that didn't really work out. And I had some private money deals, but this one's probably the best purchase. So that 10 unit was awesome, and it's done very well, and it's had good returns and whatever. But this thing, we're getting a total of 79 doors for 2.375, which comes out to like 24,000 a door. Wow. And the hotel had been bankrupt at one point. So he bought it from the bank like 9 months ago. And so he couldn't sell it to us because he didn't want to play short-term capital gains. He tried to convert it to a assisted living facility, and the city didn't want it. So they told him no. He was like, well, I'm 62. I want to retire. I don't want to manage a hotel. That's too much. And so he got one of my letters for his single family house and was like, well, I got this other stuff. And we started talking, and 3 months worth of negotiating and communication later, I was like, okay, well, let me have my friends take a look at it with my property manager. And one of my friends owns a hotel, and he was like, dude, I want in. So like, all right, well, that sounds good. So we kept talking. And basically, as we're trying to negotiate how we're going to buy this so that he doesn't have to pay short-term capital gains tax, he can't actually sell it till like September. It was like a Friday, and my buddy's sitting with him at his house doing a lease. And he was like, I'll tell you what, if you give me $100,000 on Monday, it's yours. And so like literally that was like the conversation is like, okay, so we like took this lease on like a Saturday, red penned some stuff, changed some stuff, added in like a contingency that basically said, hey, the 100,000 is refundable if we find something off our inspection structural in the first 2 weeks. And then, yeah, we literally gave this guy $100,000 3 days later. In fact, there was like a bullet in the lease that was like, I certify that have had time to talk with our attorneys about this or whatever. And I like crossed it out and deleted that line. It was like, there's no way that's going in there. Right. Talk about this on a Friday night and give him money on a Monday morning. No attorney we could talk to over the weekend. So anyway, yeah, we basically have between September and December, we have to close it. But so March, when we took over April 5th, March was their first like break even month. And in April, I mean, we put $15,000 to $20,000 worth of like startup costs into it, like computers, training, whatever. And we still broke even. So without those, I mean, there's a chance that thing's going to cash flow 15, 20, 25,000 a month. Nice. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But the numbers on it so far are incredible. I'm fairly certain we got a $2 million hotel for $950. And then that's not even including the other 39 doors that we close on June 1st, which we're buying at a 11.6 cap. So wow, pretty incredible deal. And we haven't got cleared to close yet, but what we are getting from the bank, what they've told us so far is, so we're paying 15% down, 4.75% fixed on a 25-year note with no balloon. Wow. Awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah. Wow. So I don't think we can lose on that one.
No, right. No.
We'll be all right.
Yeah. So, like a big thing for people too is that like even scaling sounds really scary. So like what made you want to go from, I guess, the duplex now to the hotel? Because people in itself, like some people just go single family, small multifamily, big multifamily. So how did you even drift off to the hotel?
Well, for one thing, I'm a jump out of a plane, find a parachute later type guy. Basically, if it sits down in front of me and the numbers look good, I'll go for it. Whether it's a single family or if it was 100 doors or whatever, I have no qualms. I enjoy chasing the bigger stuff. I just don't enjoy. Well, we talked about this jokingly on my podcast. Like I did the first syndication and I was like, wow, there's a lot of crud in here with SEC attorneys and paperwork and systems that I don't want to mess with at all. So like for me, like this deal was great because it's just me, my roommate, and my buddy Hugh, who already owned a hotel. And we just went 33% in. We each threw 100K in and we were like, all right, let's go. And so it was simple, right? There was we threw an LLC together and called it a day. And I would, I don't even know that the deal size matters if I'm in it with friends, right? I went from a duplex to a 10 unit as my second purchase. And that was probably more nerve wracking than this was, just because that was all on my own. I had no idea if that was a good decision or not. And it was like a D-class property. So I'd heard all the horror stories and that one turned out really well. But this one was a lot easier because it's me and some friends. And so, and all of us, we basically, when we were talking about all the things that could go right or could go wrong and all the numbers, we basically sat around and I was like, if you lose 100 grand, is it going to end your life? If you lose okay, so we can all afford to take this risk, right? Screw it, let's go for it. And so it's just like a couple of friends having a good time with a property that has a lot of potential, and that's fun for me. And it kind of took all the scare out of it because it's like, well, all of us are financially stable, all of us can afford this risk, and all of us are excited about it. So what do we have to lose?
Yeah, absolutely. And even a big part of real estate is like doing it with a team, right? Like whether you're JVing with one other person or you have like 4 other general partners in the deal with you, like doing that teamwork definitely makes it so much easier when everybody all has skin in the game. So that's very true.
Especially if one of those other GPs does the paperwork.
Right.
Yeah. And I am so okay with that.
That's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to work on something together in the future, Dave.
But as long as you guys do the paperwork, I'm down.
You got the paperwork, man.
Yeah.
To put in perspective how bad I am at this or how little I care about the paperwork side, my roommate and I flipped a house, like a wholesale deal. And I signed the seller's contract or whatever. And he comes into the house and he signed. I don't remember how the conversation went down, but it was like after all the closing docs were off, he's like, hey, did you read through all that stuff? I was like, no. He's like, oh, probably one of us probably should the next time we close a property. Like, yeah. Like we both just signed the thing thinking the other would read it and send it off in the mail. I had no idea. Like neither of us for all we knew, the closing docs could have been totally wrong and we would have just flip, sign and moved on. Like, all right. But
That's
luckily it didn't burn us.
Right. Yeah. No, true.
Nice. So unfortunately, we're getting towards the end of the show, which brings us to the Adventurous 4. These are 4 exploratory questions we ask every guest. So the first question, David, is where is one place you wish to travel and why?
Switzerland or anywhere in the Alps, because I think it's absolutely beautiful.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, it is beautiful. So that's a great place. So second question is, what is the number one thing on your bucket list and how are you leveraging real estate investing to achieve it?
Man, I saw that question when you guys sent it to me. I don't know that I have like a number one thing on my bucket list so much as just the freedom and ability to be able to travel, and go where I want, do what I want. Like I like cultures. So I guess my bucket list would just be experiencing a ton of different cultures across a ton of different countries and doing it with friends and family. And real estate just allows me the opportunity because the cash flow comes in whether I'm at home or not at home. So might as well not be at home.
Right. Yeah. I completely agree.
So the third question is, what is one piece of advice for someone who wants to start passively investing in real estate?
I think the first piece of advice is to focus on education.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody gets sucked into wanting to make an investment now. And I understand that, but if I could turn my camera over to my bookshelf, right? Like there's things you should learn before you start doing it, because anybody and everybody will be willing to help you make a return or help, take your money and learn and give you a return. But you got to know what you're doing, what your goal is, like what your 5-year goal is, and what you actually want. Like for some people, that might be buying their own rentals and having a property manager. For some people, that might just be a limited partner passively investing in a syndication. And it's really going to depend on kind of what your goal is in life and how you want to manage that. So I think the best thing you could do is just spend some time reading books and talking to other people to figure out, what they're doing, what's working for them. But if you want to be a passive investor, then I think you should read the what is it, the Hands-Off Investor, the New Bigger Pockets book that's basically written for limited partners, so that you can learn, about who is worth giving your money to be passive. And I think that's for a lot of people in the military or with busy jobs, being an LP is an incredible investment. So
absolutely.
Could agree more. Yeah.
And then the fourth and final question is, if you had unlimited resources available to you, how would you leave an impact?
You know who Dan Bilzerian is?
I don't know.
Oh man, this would have been so much funnier if you both knew exactly what I was. That was a joke. That was a bad joke. He's basically like the new generation Hugh Hefner, I guess. So like everybody. So anyway, man, that's a good question. How would I leave an impact? I guess it would probably be finding a way to actually reach, like help the military build a platform for people who are joining, right? Yeah. So like right now they have financial advisors. I mean, I'm a command financial specialist, but the system's not really there for people to learn all this stuff at their first unit or at their MOS school or at boot camp. And I think that like that's the best place and time you could meet with somebody. So I think if I had unlimited resources, that would probably be the goal. It's not an easy goal to get into because of all the yellow tape and whatnot to make it through. But I think if you could target financial, like service members financially very, very, very early on and just give them solid advice, maybe help break some of that cultural buy a fancy sports car thing right away, you'd be able to impact a lot of lives.
Yeah, I think you're already making an impact that way. You wrote this book called the No BS Guide to Military Life, right? And so literally, I mean, I'm reading it. I'm like 20 pages from the end, which is awesome. Really great book. And I'll plug it right now. And so I teach at the Air Force Academy, right? Or we'll be teaching back at the Air Force Academy. I plan on buying this for every senior that's in my class to give this to them before they graduate, right? Because it's something that I wish I had when I was enlisted, and then also when I was a young lieutenant. Like, if I had this advice, I would be 10 years ahead of where I am right now. So yeah, like you said, there's not a lot of financial literacy information that's given to the military, or any kind of really information is given to the military as you join, right? You have like somebody to kind of like take you on and onboard you and everything like that, but like just giving you some general information about like, hey, you need to think about these things to kind of make sure that your career is on the trajectory you wanted to be on. So yeah, I
appreciate that.
Yeah. So before we end the show, Dave, would you mind sharing with our listeners, how they can get a hold of you, like about your platform, your podcast, everything like that?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to FromMilitaryToMillionaire.com. Most of my stuff is there. Or you can, if you want to hit me up personally, my Instagram at FromMilitaryToMillionaire is usually the best place to message me because they get lost a lot in translation everywhere else. And we got a big Facebook group, but basically if you just Google Military Millionaire, most of my stuff will start popping up. So you look for the ugly dude with the mustache and you're like, oh, I'm in the right spot.
Stop it. Cool. I'll make sure to add that to all the show notes. So thank you. But David, it was a pleasure having you on. It was a lot of fun. And it's just been great. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is always a pleasure talking to you guys.
Yeah, for sure. So until next time, explore more, adventure awaits.
Woo!